Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for this Tough Pig staff meeting. It is now time to figure out what's going to be on the old 70 Years, 70 Muppets podcast feed now that the whole 70th anniversary celebration is over.
I'm on board.
Okay, settle down everyone. Becca, please, order in the court. I'll now open the floor to podcast pitch ideas.
Oh, I know. How about we watch Lady Gaga and the Muppets Holiday Spectacular 2 minutes at a time and talk about it a lot?
That just sounds painful.
All right, so I've been working on a deep dive into the history of Janice's twin sister. I'm only going to need 8 or 9 episodes to get started based on the spreadsheets that I've made already.
Did we ever even see her on screen?
Okay, but picture this. A true crime podcast investigating the original, terrifying design of Nanny from Downstairs Muppet Babies.
No. Maybe a little too visual.
What if we do a podcast where we recreate all of the Swedish chef's recipes?
Well, we could, but then we'd be the first podcast to get shut down by the Board of Health.
How about a podcast all about Miss Piggy?
Aren't you already working on that?
Yes, and you can listen to Season 1 of the Fantastic Miss Piggy podcast on the Muppet Fan Podcast with ToughPigs.com channel, wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, shameless plug. Who else has something?
2 words. We should have a pancake jamboree.
That's not a podcast idea. Are you just trying to get a free meal?
I'm so hungry, Jared.
You Americans and your food.
How about a podcast about a lonely dog, and one night he sees something he never should have seen, and he has to live with a terrible secret?
No, we're doing a Muppets Tonight spoof here, not a Muppets Most Wanted spoof.
Okay, hear me out. 15 episodes on the worm from Labyrinth. People love that guy. It's a slam dunk.
Small worms, small potatoes. Let's think bigger, people.
I didn't host any of these podcasts. Why am I here?
Yeah, great question, Matthew.
How's about TBA, huh?
Hang on. Guys, TBA means to be announced, which means that we don't have a podcast?
What?
Oh,
no. What? No show? That's terrible. Anyway, what if we trick Lucas Ross into appearing on a bunch of podcasts?
Wait, this is serious. We've got to put together a show for this podcast feed. Are you all with me?
Yeah!
After all, we've been in worse spots before, right?
Right!
But we all pulled together and made it work because we're a team, right?
Right!
Okay, alright. Woo! So, who wants to volunteer to produce this new podcast?
Hi, yeah, I'd like to order a chicken with broccoli, 2 egg rolls, a matzo ball soup.
Congratulations, Joe. You're producing the new show.
Hang on a second, Mom. Oh, great. Sounds like fun. When does it start?
Oh, in about 10 seconds.
Hey, I'll call you right back. 10 seconds? Hello and welcome to the first episode of Season 2 of 70 Years, 70 Muppets, which we're calling More Muppets, Please, presented by ToughPigs.com. Last year, the Muppets celebrated their 70th anniversary with 70 weeks of spotlights on 70 characters, and we joined in on the fun with a companion podcast. We're keeping that celebration going with even more spotlights on the Muppets who didn't make the cut, from fan favorites to the most obscure. I am this week's host, Joe Hennis, and the Muppet of the Week is Clifford, performed by Kevin Clash, designed by Kirk Thatcher, built by Tim Miller, and making his world debut in 1989. Over the past year and a half, while the Muppet Studio at Disney's been giving spotlights to all the most famous Muppets, as well as a few randos to fill the gaps, Muppet fans were making guesses as to who would be given the honor of a feature. The one Muppet that seems to have been on everyone's bingo card, yet didn't make the final cut, was Clifford. Truth be told, I fully expected Clifford to be on the main list too. How did the screaming goat get a whole week, but not the guy who was literally the star of an entire Muppet series? But despite Muppet Studios' decision to give Clifford the cold shoulder, they've inadvertently given us a perfect segue into the second season of this very podcast. Clifford, in my opinion, represents a specific moment in Muppet history and the overall concept of change. Clifford made his debut on the Jim Henson Hour as a signature character for Kevin Clash. Clash had already been working on Sesame Street for most of a decade, and his performance as Elmo was climbing in popularity. He was also working directly with Jim Henson on projects like A Celebration of 30 Years, Tale of the Bunny Picnic, and Labyrinth. It seemed like Clifford was a gift to Clash, giving him his own signature character in the Muppet troupe while also inviting him into the inner circle of puppeteers. The Clifford of this era breaks rule number 21 of Pixar's 22 rules of storytelling. He's defined by being cool. He's got cool dreadlocks, he wears cool sunglasses, and he has a cool baritone voice. He's the Poochie of the Muppets, but like in a good way. We like seeing this cool guy hang around his buddy Kerm, who gets to be cool by proxy. Of course, Clifford's cool comes at a price. His Jim Henson Hour appearances lack purpose and character development, which will come back to bite him in the butt a few years later. Over the next few years, Clifford is cemented within the Muppet family. He seemingly joins the Electric Mayhem as an auxiliary percussionist in the Muppets of Walt Disney World, and he appeared with Kermit the Frog on the Arsenio Hall show in what would famously be known as Jim Henson's final public appearance. Post-Jim, Clifford stuck around in projects like the Muppet Beach Party and Kermit Unpigged albums, as well as the CD-ROM game Muppets Inside. And all throughout, he's Mr. Cool Guy. And then, in 1996, the Muppets returned to television with Muppets Tonight. My own recollection of that era was that the world was still getting used to Steve Whitmire's Kermit the Frog, who was reduced to a smaller role in Muppet Christmas Carol and Muppet Treasure Island beforehand, so it made sense that although he'd still be present, it wasn't really expected that he'd play the same role as he did on The Muppet Show and The Jim Henson Hour. And with most of the other Muppets too locked in with their own unique personalities, it made sense to give the spotlight to someone new. Or in this case, sort of new. Clifford's definitive coolness made him a shoo-in to be the star of this TGIF Muppet Show. He'd give the Muppets that edge they've lost over the past decade, and a jolt of adrenaline from the new blood. And it allowed Kevin Clash, who was likely still thought of as the young guy of the troupe, to drive the energy of the show. It all made so much sense at the time. Much like Commander William Riker growing a beard or Arthur Fonzarelli water skiing over a shark, all it takes is a tiny change to affect an entire series. In this case, they took away Clifford's sunglasses. His superpower of cool was sacrificed so we could see his eyes, which I guess is sort of important for being the host of a TV show. I hate to use the word neutered when referring to Muppet characters, aside from Phil Van, but that's sort of what happened to Clifford. Without his most recognizable characteristic, he became a homey made of foamy, but with foamy being the prime descriptor of his personality. Sometimes he was confidently in charge, sometimes he would panic, sometimes he'd be smart, sometimes he'd be stupid, and sometimes he'd be horny. It seemed like he could be anything except consistent. Despite being nerfed, I think it's safe to say that we still liked Clifford a lot as the host of Muppets Tonight. He injected a lot of life into the Muppet franchise and reminded us of the potential for the growth of the Muppet troupe beyond Kermit, Piggy, Fozzie, and Gonzo. He helped usher the Muppets into the 90s simply by being the type of character that thrives in the 90s. It's neither the character's fault or the performer's fault that he lost so much of his coolness by having to play host. One might argue that Kermit the Frog went through a similar change when he had to step up as host of The Muppet Show. Unfortunately, what happened next was the downfall of Clifford. Muppets Tonight was canceled after 2 seasons, and he began to fall into obscurity. From here, Clifford's appearances are extremely few and far between, including popping up in video games, small appearances in Muppets from Space and Muppets Wizard of Oz, and being illustrated in comic books. His most recent appearance was in 2006 on Muppets TV, a French Muppet show that I have never seen. Much like the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, a subject I swear I don't think about very often, Clifford spent a third of his existence rising to power, a third at the height of popularity, and a third in a slow decline. But looking back, Clifford played a pivotal role in the transitional era of the 1990s. He was created while Jim Henson was still alive and active with the Muppets. He was the linchpin of the Muppets' biggest TV project of the era, and then he faded away as the Muppets entered their next phase of existence under the Disney umbrella. I think a lot of Muppet fans think of the history of the brand in two parts. There's the Jim Henson era and the post-Jim era. But the 90s was the middle ground, with the Jim Henson Company still in charge of the characters, trying a lot of different things to make sure the franchise doesn't die out with its founder. Picture a hardcover book, opened in the middle, 1955 to 1990s on the left side, 2002 to today is on the right. This era is that part in the middle, that binding that keeps it all together. This is Clifford's era, as if he was created just for this purpose and then discarded once he wasn't needed anymore. That's why I like to think of Clifford as an avatar of change. The Muppets as characters don't change a whole lot, sunglasses notwithstanding, but the franchise does, and we've seen plenty of examples of changes that come too fast and feel like whiplash. Clifford represents that era of change, for better and for worse. Even though he was loved by many in his time, he's become an unintentional scapegoat for the lackluster 90s era of the Muppets. Would the same have happened to Kermit if he kept his title as host for Muppets Tonight? It's impossible to say, but if it was a possibility, then it's probably for the best that it went to someone a smidge more disposable. Bringing this whole thing back around to this podcast, we're obviously going through a bit of change as well. We just spent a year and a half playing along with Disney's big 70th anniversary campaign, and we had a blast making a weekly podcast about all the Muppets who got a spotlight. We could have taken this as an opportunity to just put a bow on it and move on. But we chose to keep it going, both to continue having fun making it and to pay homage to more of the Muppets who may have deserved a coveted spot in the 70th anniversary campaign. And much like Clifford taking the role of host, I have taken the role of producer for this next year, hopefully promising a lot of the same fun you're used to, but slightly updated for the 90s. 2026. Of course, we have to ask the question, why wasn't Clifford on Muppet Studios' original list? He was front and center for 21 out of 22 episodes of Muppets Tonight. He got his own Palisades action figure. He's got a cool, unique design that would have made for great fan art. And to many people, he can be seen as a representation of the Black community, both on screen and behind the scenes, which would have added some much needed diversity to the campaign. This podcast isn't the place to talk about Kevin Clash's history, but it's certainly the elephant in the room. Suffice it to say, if it was intentional to keep Clifford out of the campaign just because of his connection to Clash, then they probably shouldn't have featured Bad Polly, another Kevin Clash original. We've now gone over 20 years without seeing Clifford on screen. While it seems likely that we may never see him again, I have to wonder what he might have been up to over those last 2 decades if he'd stuck around. Would Kermit collect him along with the other Muppets when reuniting in the 2011 movie The Muppets? Would he have joined Walter, Fozzie, and Animal on their trek to the Gulag in Muppets Most Wanted? Would he have joined the band officially in Muppets Mayhem? For now, we'll have only speculation and fan fiction to fill in this continuing gap in Clifford's history. If you'll indulge me, I'd like to do a little bit of my own creative development on how I'd like to see Clifford return to the Muppet fold. I've always loved the idea that each Muppet serves a purpose within the Muppet Theater, whether it be as a performer or a crew member, and with the exception of Kermit the Frog, they should probably be really bad at their job, or at least misguided. Let's see Clifford really lean into his reputation as the cool one and become the arbiter of cool, much like Sam the Eagle dictating content to fit the censors or Bean Bunny providing cuteness to appease the ratings. Clifford could be doing everything he can to keep the Muppets modern and relevant to disastrous results. Sort of like the role Floyd played in the earliest Muppet Show episodes before he was absorbed into the Electric Mayhem as one big cohesive unit. I think it could be fun because the Muppets are timeless, and most real-world attempts at making them cool are futile and totally unnecessary. Plus, how hilarious would it be to watch a meeting of the minds between Clifford, Sam, and Bean, all trying their darndest to improve on the Muppet formula? All this is to say, Clifford has served many purposes throughout his existence. He was important in the growth of Kevin Clash as a core performer. He was a guiding force in the Muppets TV presence in the 90s, and he's a rare example of how being cool can be a character trait as well as an example of how removing that cool can be detrimental. He's a symbol of a forgotten era for the Muppets, which was an important pivot point for the entire franchise, and of course, he's full of potential for what his future may or may not hold. Much like Clifford, the 70 Years 70 Muppets podcast is taking off its sunglasses and trying something new. Whether it's a good change or not remains to be seen, but one thing we do know is that change is a-comin'. It may not be as cool as it was before, but we're going to keep going. For another season or two at least. Thanks for joining us for 70 Years 70 Muppets, More Muppets Please. We've got a great year of silly podcasts about a whole lot more Muppets who we're surprised didn't make the cut in the original list, as well as a bunch that we just like a lot and want to talk about. It's going to be fun. We hope. Probably. 70 Years 70 Muppets, More Muppets Please is a Muppet fan podcast presented by toughpigs.com. Hosted by a myriad of people and edited by them as well. Produced by Joe Hennis. The Muppets 70 logo is used with permission by the Muppet Studio, with thanks to Danny Iglesias, Frank Reifschneider, and Lee Slaughter. Don't forget to follow toughpigs.com on all social media platforms, and you can support us by heading to patreon.com/toughpigs or by buying merchandise at tpublic.com/toughpigs.